Newsweek senior foreign policy writer Tom O'Connor, who joins me from New York. Tom, Russia says the first phase of its military campaign in Ukraine is over. What does that mean? Is that a sign of a changing strategy?
Well, it's certainly the first indication we've seen so far that Russia may not actually go to push into the cities as initially expected. Obviously, it seems that Russia has encountered quite fierce resistance on the outskirts of these cities. But Russia is the message coming from the Kremlin right now is that they want to sort of dig into these areas and allow the eastern areas, especially the regions held by the separatists, to further entrench their positions over there. So, you could read this and say, okay, perhaps Russia is adjusting its goals. At the same time, Russia still has plenty of its firepower available to it, despite the significant losses it's sustained.
The U.S. president visited Poland, visiting American troops there. Talk to us about the significance of that and what message do you think he's sending both to Americans, Ukrainians, and perhaps even Russia?
Well, I think the first message that President Biden wants to send is one of unity among NATO states and among European states supportive of his actions. As this crisis drags on, of course, the economic second-order effects of it are hitting European countries, be it in gas prices, be it in economic shock effects of the sanctions against Russia. And I think that President Biden wants to keep that momentum up. At the same time, he wants to still draw that line between ensuring that the U.S. and NATO are not a direct party to this conflict. And that's why, despite President Zelensky expressing disappointment on this, there's no plans for a no-fly zone. There's no plans for certain stronger armaments to be sent to Ukraine. At the same time, though, there is plans to increase that support to Ukraine, and while at the same time bolstering NATO's eastern flank by essentially doubling the amount of battle groups that exist there.
The Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky says he was let down by that emergency NATO summit. Why do you think that is? What was he expecting?
Well, it's hard to tell if President Zelensky actually expected the declaration of a no-fly zone, as some of the reports have indicated, because it's something that U.S. and other NATO officials have been pretty clear in dismissing as just not a possibility right now. President Biden, perhaps being the most forthcoming in saying that such a move that could lead to direct U.S.-Russia clashes would essentially lead to World War III. So I think it's important to remember at times like this that Ukraine is not a NATO member, and it's not though it is aspiring to be. Part of President Zelensky's public messaging recently after the talks or throughout the talks with Russia has been that might be a point they're walking away from. So there is a limit, I think, to NATO support, and there's been billions of dollars poured in by the U.S. specifically into this. So there is a lot of U.S. support to NATO and U.S. support to Ukraine and NATO support to Ukraine. But at the same time, there is limits to that, and those limits don't seem to be moved at this time right now, especially when it comes to bigger effects like no-fly zones.
All right, Tom O'Connor in New York. Tom, thank you.